Hey, everybody. Welcome to an episode of Fintech Brews. I'm Nikkee Rhody, along with Eric Cotton and a very special guest today, Sunil from Fiserv, head of Fintech and Growth. Thank you both for joining today.
Thank you.
You bet. Sunil, I can't wait to have you share a little bit about your story, what Fiserv is doing, and this new partnership we've entered into between Fiserv and Central Payments. But before I do that, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that you, Sunil, and you, Eric, were recently on the Fintech Live New York event. And so the question of the day is, Sunil, how much did you have to carry Eric?
I'd let everybody just watch the video and make the judgment for themselves.
Okay.
But I think it was a very very complimentary kind of episode for both of us. It was good.
The tape won't lie. I relied heavily on Sunil's expertise.
Did you echo a lot? Did you echo that?
Yep. That was my move.
Sounds about right.
Oh, he did. He started with a couple of echoes, and I was just like, okay. And then I think the narrator or the facilitator understood his strategy and just started asking him questions first.
Yep. He made me deal first. Good. So yep.
Yeah. It's usually what we do. We try to put him out on the plank whenever possible.
Yep.
Well, on a serious note, thank you, Sunil, so much for joining. I'd love to just start with you describing a little bit about what you do for Fiserv. I think you've been there a little over 5 years, if I'm not wrong. What does head of Fintech and Growth look like? And just maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, look, this is great. First of all, thank you so much for the invite. Appreciate being on here. I'm actually a boomerang at Fiserv. So I started mostly I was picked up in international many years ago, around 2011. Stayed around 4 or 5 years then at original Fiserv. Worked mostly internationally in banking and payments. Left for a startup and then came back. So in my second stint, I've been about 4 years. And during that time, I spent a lot of energy around community banking. I headed up 2 of our core banking platforms that support close to 700 financial institutions in the market today. And then I got exposed to a lot of fintechs through that activity because we were living in a post-Durbin world. And as we started getting engaged with fintechs, what we realized as an organization was that we weren't really organized in a way that we could face off against what fintechs as buyers of financial services would need. We were very much focused in selling our capabilities to financial institutions, to corporations, to merchants, but the development community was a little bit of a new animal. So we created the Fintech group, and I'm very proud to have to be leading that group for the last, I think now 18 months. And what we basically do, Nikkee, is like we take products and services that historically were deployed to FIs and merchants, and we reconfigure them in a way they can be consumed with a broader TAM, which is supporting this whole wave of embedded finance with the development community and with fintechs that are looking to embed financial services in different user experiences. And that's where, I met this gentleman, Eric Cotton and Central Payments, and it was a very complimentary view on how we were seeing the landscape and where we saw the growth. So the partnership just made a whole lot of sense.
I appreciate that. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about when you say, you've historically focused on the banks and credit unions and the cores. What do you find, in your opinion, does the fintech industry need that is very unique and different from the bank and credit union space?
I think there's a couple of elements. One is, they need more fin than tech, in the sense that they need a lot of education on kind of the regulatory environment, right? And we continue to see blips of, why that's important today. Just last week, we had a couple of consent orders go out to financial institutions that work with fintechs, unfortunately. But in the broad universe of sponsor banks, a lot of those sponsor banks are actually doing a great job working with fintechs. But the fintechs need to appreciate kind of all the regulations that financial institutions have to deal with for the privilege of having a charter in this country. The other thing that we find with the fintechs is speed. right? Obviously, that's the big difference between them and the financial institutions. They are very maniacal on the user experience and focused on getting out the best capability and service for their targeted demographic. So we have to operate a little bit differently within Fiserv to make sure that we can keep up with their needs without breaking anything on the back end, right? And then the third piece is just from a commercial model, it's very different. A lot of fintechs and third parties have come to market, looking to take advantage of kind of the debit interchange model that's out there. And they are soon to realize that they can't run a business just on kind of that one trick pony. So we work with them quite a bit on the commercial side. I've been privileged to work with a couple of great fintechs that were Series A, Series B, and they were attracted to Fiserv just because of our broad distribution. We have so many financial institutions, credit unions, and merchants. They'd love nothing more for us to help them get into those front doors. And as we did that, what we realized was that there was a lot of work they needed to do, both on the tech, the commercialization, the go-to-market piece. And that's where I think we've really stepped up as an organization to kind of help them through that.
I love that. You know about Pulse FinTech and the accelerator we started in 2020. I can't tell you how many fintech companies would apply to be part of our program, and we'd say, "What's your go-to-market strategy, and what does your financial model look like?" And they're like, "We're just going to live on interchange." I'm like, "That's fun, but no." So yeah, it's very interesting, and there's definitely an education component to that. Eric, how do you think that over your tenure and different partners that we've talked to, what do you think the fintechs need as it relates to the partnership that we provide? Because what I hear, although I hate complimenting Eric, it's really painful for my soul. What I constantly hear from people is, man, I love talking to Eric because there's this consultative approach where he just gets it. And so when you talk to the fintechs, what do they need that you seem to get?
It's an interesting question because it's not a one size fits all answer. And I think that's where, the partnership with Fiserv comes in. And Sunil had mentioned it. You have to be complementary to your partnerships. So we have some partners that are very strong from an operational and distribution perspective, and we can kind of lean back a little bit there and focus more on regulatory and consumer compliance, or vice versa. So it all starts with listening and kind of understanding your audience. What are our partners strong at, and where are they looking for help? And I think Central Payments historically has just done a wonderful job of meeting our partners where they are and forming this really great partnership.
Yeah. So let's talk about this partnership between Fiserv and Central Payments. Sunil, what are you super excited about as we venture into this next chapter?
Yeah, look, for me, it comes down to the basics, right? I think, first of all, the partnership, I feel is going to be very successful just because of the people involved, right? And I've met a lot of the folks at Central Payments, including obviously Eric and others, and I think our teams get along very well. So that's a great sign, right? And the other piece is that we both recognize what each is bringing to the table and what are the incentives that each of us have. And I think that's really required for a strong partnership going forward. Like, we're only going to bring deals to Eric that we know makes sense for Central Payments, and he's going to do the same for us. And we all know that when we do get into a deal, that we're no longer Fiserv and Central Payments, we are this partnership. And it's about us holding up each other to make sure that we deliver for the fintech or the program that we want to support and we want to engage with. So I think from the people to the processes to kind of the way we look at the marketplace, again, very complimentary. And I think it's I'm very excited about what's to come with our partnership.
You bet. Eric, how about for you?
Yeah, I mean, Sunil, exactly right.
You want to echo him?
I want to echo him. I think just let me reread it. But
you saw the play.
Yeah, I mean, you can already tell as the partnership was forming that we understand our lanes. We understand our audience, whether it's a partner we source or one that Fiserv sort of brings into this joint partnership. I think there is a a very baseline and embedded understanding from both organizations where this fits, and it's just been very smooth, open, transparent so far. I think it's the people getting along, being very open, and making this thing work.
Yeah. One thing that I find really interesting is, as you know, in 2022, Central Payments had a change of control where we're no longer a wholly owned subsidiary of Central Bank of Kansas City anymore. And so that's had us doing a little bit of an identity shift in how we position ourselves in the market. Of course, we still have the agency of the bank, and we've added more banks, which helps. But the space of program management is pretty rare, especially program management by bankers for all intents and purposes. So we get the fin in fintech, and then with OpenCP, we get the tech that complements the fin. And then, of course, with your guys' reputation in the industry, I think it's just a really cool synergy. So I thank you for the advocacy and the partnership that you guys have created. Sunil, I'm going to come back to the core conversation. So some people might think of Fiserv and think of you guys just exclusively as a bank core. We know that that's not the case, but tell the audience more about what Fiserv offers beyond just core processing for banks.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nikkee. So, Fiserv is a company that moves money and data in a way that moves the world, right? That's what we like to say. And over the last couple of years, as we've come together with First Data, I think it's probably 4 years now with that merger, we sit in a very privileged position in the U.S. and around the world. We have an awesome footprint of financial institutions across banks and credit unions. We have equally, if not a broader footprint on the merchant side of the business. And both pieces are very important in a day and age where all you're seeing is convergence of banking and payments, right? And as the digitization of the economy continues, you're going to see more and more people kind of blur the lines of where they make their payments and where they do their banking, right? Ultimately, behind the scenes, you're still going to need the FIs because they're the chartered institutions, they're regulated. But you're going to see an opportunity for them to work with all of these third parties and technology organizations and merchant organizations to make payments and banking as convenient as possible, as frictionless as possible. So for us, we are, at the top of the league tables across merchant acquiring, merchant processing, digital banking, core banking, money movement. We process most of the ACHs, 60% of the ACHs in the country. So we are up there in kind of every table that matters, right? And for us, it's now about thinking horizontally. How do we bring all of those pieces together and blend it with the right partnerships, like with a CP, to ensure that we could deliver the best experiences, regardless of where it originates. It could originate on a banking app, or it could originate at Walmart, or it could originate at Target, or it could originate at a fintech, right? What we want to be able to do is kind of plug all of the holes in the back to ensure that there's a seamless experience that is also very compliant and consistent with the regulations that exist today. So we are just uber excited within the company. I think we had a senior leadership meeting just a couple of weeks ago, and our CEO Frank Bisignano said a couple of words, followed by our CFO Bob Howe, and you got this real sense of optimism in the room because everybody felt like the merger was working really well and we were just hitting our stride. And we feel like the next 12 to 18 months, there's an opportunity for us to really differentiate ourselves from not only traditional competitors, but also kind of competitors that people would never kind of put us in the same ballpark in, right? We're talking the large network providers. We're talking the large technology companies that are out there. So I think in Fiserv in general, there's a great sense of optimism of what's to come, and that we have all the building blocks and the pieces to kind of really think horizontally to take embedded finance, through this convergence orientation that we're living through.
I think that's really wise. On that note, what are some of the things beyond the horizontal kind of framework that you're thinking through that you guys are doubling down on, be it a particular vertical or anything in that kind of consideration?
Yeah, I think all the main lines of businesses are benefiting from the horizontal, right? And that's what makes the horizontal so powerful. So from the banking side of the business, we continue to invest in our existing tech stack, but we also acquired some great pieces just the last couple of years, right? Finxact, which is a Gen 3 core, cloud native, API native, allows us to bring a ledger that is digital asset friendly, right? So think about having a ledger that can not only support traditional finance, but modern finance. And it can make any type of asset fungible, right? So if you have loyalty points, traditional DDA, some crypto, a securities account, there's an opportunity to create what we call a global account balance that makes all of these pieces fungible, right? Which really helps from a cash flow perspective, which again is needed when you're living in a high interest rate environment, right? And then all of this stuff can be interrogated or initiated off of traditional banking products, which makes the banks happy, right? And it also makes the merchants happy because you're able to kind of have bigger basket sizes at the point of sale because you're leveraging all of that cash flow. I think one of the key things that we've seen in the banking side over the last couple of years is a lot of wallet fragmentation, right? Money is all over the place. And we now have a Gen 3 ledger that brings it all back together and can be interrogated or initiated from a single payment device. On the merchant side, same thing. They are attacking omni-channel like crazy, right? They are trying to figure out what is the footprint from a physical perspective and an online perspective. The same thing the branches are doing and the banks are doing. They're doing that in their own kind of cycle. And they're trying to figure out, how do I make sure that with all the Venmos, the PayPals, and stored value products and open loop and closed loop, what do I expect? What do I accept? And when do I accept it? They need something that really ties all of that stuff together. So, both of these industries are going through kind of some of the same type of, programs to figure out how to engage the customer and grow their businesses. So really the horizontal across the company is, I would say hitting on all cylinders right now.
Describing it as wallet fragmentation, I suppose that's the first time I've heard that, but it makes a ton of sense. Eric, I'll turn to you and ask about when you look across Central Payments and all the opportunities that are there and different competing priorities that we might have, where are we doubling down? What is the area of focus that you are most excited about?
Yeah, we're obviously investing heavily in speed of funds movement. Anything real time, we are taking second and third looks and jumping in feet first. We've got Fed Now, that is starting to go live from an industry perspective that we're looking into. So it's not so much adding new feature and functionality right now. It's more offering those additional embedded products that we have across our whole platform that benefit some of our partners that have been on the platform for a while. So wherever we can create some efficiencies and conveniences for our partners, that's always a big win for us. And touching a little bit on what Sunil said, why this partnership is so exciting is, as Sunil was going through, we're looking heavily at, getting a little bit more involved in the acquiring space and, potentially credit. And, Sunil mentioned their footprint there and, who better to partner with, in the market, and again, introducing some of our existing strategic partners to than the industry leader.
Out of curiosity, given the climate and everything that's been happening with the bank pressure, what, Sunil, do you see as the future for neobanks?
That's a great question. It's interesting because you probably have to answer it in a couple of different ways. But the current economic climate, right, where you have all of this banking turmoil, Nikkee, and then you've got the backdrop still is a high interest rate environment, right? And I'm kind of smiling as you ask that question because just today I've talked to two financial institutions that are launching digital banks, and they're launching digital banks because they've got a deposits issue, and they want to grow outside of their MSA, but they don't want to cannibalize their existing customers and the low cost funding they have today, right? So this is a playbook that we saw like 3-4 years ago, right? Before interest rates were so low for so long, and then it's back again because they've got to figure out how to do this, and that was the original kind of thesis to go work with a neobank and a fintech, right? Was like, hey, I could launch my own digital bank, but I've only got the same operational people and the same folks that are working on my traditional banking services. So what do I do, right? And then fintechs would come along and say, well, look, I've got a great app. I've got some secret sauce. I can go out, get some customers, give me your charter. And that's how, neobanks and Chimes and Acorns and everything was formed. So I think we're in a really interesting phase because I think, there are concerns about, potentially working with startups today from a compliance perspective and everything else. But at the same time, there's still a huge balance sheet demand that they've got to satisfy, and cost of funds continue to rise. I just think there is going to be a place, Nikkee, for neobanks going forward, especially for neobanks that are tailoring services, right? Because I think the ones that do really well are very narrow in terms of how they approach kind of their target market, and they really understand their target market, right? I always think about, and I don't have any affiliation with them, I always think about Squire. And it was a fintech, I believe, that caters to barbershops, and just to barbershops, because it was a bunch of guys that were barbers, I believe, right? And they kind of came together. They knew their cash flow situation was so variable. They knew what they needed. So they developed a fintech that could cater to barbershops. And I think they're still doing pretty well. I hope they are. Yeah. But that's the kind of tailored service that I think, is missing from institutions, even community institutions, because they don't have the time or the capability to think that narrowly about different use cases, and it may not be it may not be worth it in their community. But if you think about a neobank, thinking about that narrow community nationally, that's where it kind of makes sense from an ROI perspective. So I think there'll be a place, there'll be lessons learned, and the strong will survive.
Yeah, I think so too. We were actually just talking about this the other day. And again, I'll go back to Falls FinTech being this incubator accelerator program we kicked off a while back, and how many times we would have to tell the fintechs, make the main thing. Stay the course. What's your target market? Why are you doing this? Come back to, #Simon Sinek, but start with why. Why are you doing this? What's your approach? And not getting distracted by the shiny things, which as entrepreneurs, that's really, really hard to not do. But boy, I tell you, we saw fintechs that had a great idea and a great focus. Scope creep came into play. 3 years later, they're still not off the ground because they can't make the main thing. So that we just talked about that the other day. So Eric, on that note, what do you do when you talk to people that make their way to Central Payments and they're like, well, I've got all these crazy ideas. How do you help them kind of focus on their main thing?
Yeah, you have to be very deliberate. It is exactly that. You have to think about profitability to get to profitability. How do you get to scale? That starts with getting in market. You have to have a point at which you're out there in the market selling and earning your first dollar and iterating from there. So the pivot and I'm going to sneak in a couple of these development features here as things are a little bit idle is just the enemy of progress for some of these companies. And it all comes down to the importance of the launch and sticking to your focus. It is so important.
I know we have the Fiserv Forum conference coming up. What make a plug on that, Sunil? What are you guys going to be talking about and hitting on out there?
Well, Fiserv Forum, we're just excited that we're back to seeing our customers face to face. It's been a couple of years with the pandemic, so that's what at least I'm most excited about. And we've got a different mix of customers now, right? Because of the merger with First Data, you're going to see financial institutions, you're going to see fintechs, you're going to see merchants. I'm thinking through some of the the notable kind of topics, everything around programmable payments, embedded finance, omni-channel commerce on the merchant side. I think we're going to cover it all, Nikkee. And are you guys coming?
Well,
you guys coming?
Eric is. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I will be there for sure. She can't be out in public,
Mm.
so she will likely not be making the trip. But yeah, we are, we're excited for all the things that you just mentioned, meeting the whole, Fiserv ecosystem, payments, partners, fintechs, all of that.
So I know that this is probably not what the marketing folks would have us do, but I think there's a little bit of lead time from when this will actually drop. Sunil, when is the Fiserv Forum?
12th to the 15th. Is that right?
I think that sounds about right.
At the Venetian.
Awesome. Well, there's so much to always unpack when it relates to fintech and growth and things. So I think you did a beautiful job summarizing. I thank you for all the work that you're doing in every aspect of Fiserv, and of course, appreciate the partnership. Despite present company over here. So I thank you for that. I thank you for carving out some time for joining, and I'm going to put up a toast for partnership. So cheers to that.
Cheers.
Thanks, Sunil.